Bhakti is the path of devotion. Bhakti is the path of uniting with God by devoting yourself to God.
My name is Ashley Rose and I'm from Perth in Australia. And what brought me here today is I just wanted to learn more. I got a lot from the last class, so I just wanted to come and learn some more before I go back home.
Nice. Ashley, I like to push people.
Yes, I like it.
What did you get from last class that you can use? We're all about practical usage of yoga knowledge in real life. So what did you get that you can use in your real life?
Learning how to, now if I remember the names, is it Sattva? Yes, so to be able to transition to Sattva, and I learned so much about the fiery side and being able to just calm, be able to manage depression, anxiety, and have more awareness around where I am in the world and why that stuff is happening. And then also that through yoga I can have a relationship with God and I can have a union with God, which is very exciting. And just to also relate a lot of the values of being a yogi to other stuff that I've learned in life as well. I find it fascinating that a lot of it kind of corresponds with different practices, and so that's mainly what I got. Oh, and I from the meditation to me was very powerful. I felt reunited with my guides and my spirits for the first time in over 3 years. So it was a beautiful experience to be here.
Perfect. Wow, that's awesome. Was that in this class or the other meditation?
No, your meditation.
Was it this class, or I teach a higher self meditation on Tuesdays?
No, it was the foundations of yoga.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
I'm glad you benefited. By donation.
Yeah.
Can't lose, huh?
Yeah.
Cool. Well, thank you, Ashley.
Thank you.
I'm inspired when people actually apply it. And it sounds like you got some stuff to use. So that's sweet. Yeah, I say this a lot. John Kimbrough said, yoga is a discipline that destroys all sorrows. And so, there's this idea that philosophy is separate from life, right? Like people, have you noticed that? People will like hear a philosophical idea and they'll be like, oh yeah, that's nice. As if it's something nice to hear, and then their daily lives has nothing to do with it. But philosophy, the term means love of wisdom. And so, wisdom is meant for your real life, your daily life, or your problems that you're dealing with, big and small. And if you love wisdom, you'll cultivate it, right? And you'll be able to work your way through life much better. So I appreciate you. Thank you.
Thank you.
My name is Rania. I'm from Sudan. What brought me here today? One, Ashley told me about last Monday's class. Two is I want to learn more, and it's a Mystic Monday. I wanted to know what is mystic.
Good. Thank you, Rania. We'll talk about the mystic things. I think I said it earlier. Let me answer your question, Brian. So mystic, so we have these 3 phrases that we use: metaphysics, mysticism, and magic. Just really quickly for people who came for Mystic Mondays and we're like, what are we doing? Metaphysics is the study of the non-physical world and how it impacts the physical world. I go so far as to say actually controls, directs, guides, initiates the physical world. Real magicians simply want to use something in the metaphysical world, the non-physical world, energy, or beings, not just necessarily use beings, employ beings, petition beings. So it can be beings, things, or energies in the non-physical world. And they want to use that energy from those beings or from that world to effect some type of change, to shift something, to gain something, to let go of something, to move something, to call in things. And that's what magic is. And these things can be non-physical as well, meaning, say if you want to use one thought to overcome another thought, that's a form of magic. And you're transforming your mind by that magical practice. Or you want to use your power of thought to manifest something in the physical world that happens. Right? That's still the use of magic. And that's more physical result. So everyone got that? So that's what mysticism is. Yoga is a mystical science. Yoga automatically dives right directly into the metaphysical world because yoga has to do with the mind. The term yoga means union with God. It refers to specifically the union of the soul with God. And God is the source. God is the everything. It's the all in all, the one. It's called also the supreme soul. And so yoga means to unite this individual with the oneness. And it's already united, which means to overcome the illusion that it's not. And this is done through controlling the mind. In fact, maybe I'll read a quote from scripture, because I like scripture. The scripture is an underused tool. Actually, one of the most underused tools found it. So this is actually Krishna, God speaking, in a text called the Bhagavad Purana, or the Srimad Bhagavatam. It's book 10, chapter 47, verse 2. He says, "In the eyes of the wise, the teachings of the Vedas, which are the scriptures from India, the path of Astanga Yoga, which includes Hatha Yoga, the Sankhya system of philosophy, renunciation, suffering hardships for the sake of one's faith, controlling the senses, and truthfulness. All of these yogic practices have their goal in mind control, just as rivers terminate in the oceans." So the term yoga means union of the individual soul with God through bringing the mind to a point of absolute stillness. That's the actual definition of yoga. There are four main paths of that yogic practice. We're going to talk about Bhakti Yoga, the path of devotion, controlling the mind to unite with God through devotion and love. But the reason it's mystical is because you're dealing with something non-physical, the mind. So that's why I integrate the classes, Mystic Mondays and the Spirituality Day. Rania.
Today I stumbled upon the class and I want to use it. I also paint and I want to use it as inspiration for going deeper into my creativity.
Perfect, thank you. What's your name again?
Roya.
Roya. Nice to meet you. Thank you.
My name is Brian. I'm from New York. I think I'm very interested, have been very interested for a long time in sort of self-control, meditation, discipline outside of yoga, outside of this whole world. So I'm here to learn.
Hi, I'm Amrit from London, and I saw the session on the schedule. Just kind of jumped out, so I went with it. Simple as that.
Amrit, please tell people what your name means. Awesome name.
There's a few interpretations, but essentially what it means, it's a drink that once you drink it, you become immortal. That's the one I know, but people love to tell me about my name.
That's beautiful.
See.
Hello, I'm Ivana. I'm from Argentina, and I love Kion's class. I love to talk about these topics that usually you don't find in all this holistic spiritual practice we do. And as he said, the scriptures are not very, it's a resource we don't use that much. And since I'm starting to learn about these topics, I I got a better understanding and meaning of the practice of yoga.
Thank you, Ivana.
Thank you. Thank you.
I'm Ariel. It's my first time at your class. I'm really happy Ivana told me about it. And I'm also from Argentina. And I came to Yoga Barn quite often, and definitely I'm here now to try to make out of yoga a more complete experience. So I'm very curious by nature, and I'm very interested on all the aspects of yoga, not just the physical side, and just trying to get into the yoga of knowledge, devotion, pranayama, just get the whole picture. So thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Alright, we're good. My name's Sarah. I'm originally from Sydney, Australia. I'm here as Kian's assistant, but even if I wasn't, I would still be here. I'm actually super excited that we're doing Bhakti Yoga today, because I just came back from a little trip where I really went deep into my own spiritual process, and I was like looking back on study notes, and there was a class on the obstacles on the spiritual path, and one of the main like key points that Kian went over was to like know your why. And I think a big part of my why is devotion and love, and so I feel like that really drives me and keeps me going, and yeah, that's why I'm here. Thanks, guys.
But when I was 22 years old, I had a spontaneous Kundalini awakening. It was actually very powerful and very unusual. I almost died from it. And so it transformed me, it like threw me out of my physical body into the non-physical world. I suddenly began experiencing non-physical reality directly. And I came into contact with gods, angels, and demons. And the gods, luckily, were there to help. I learned later that I was a channel, and I began, Goddess Saraswati came to my rescue, and she became my principal guide, and she led me to Michael. It's commonly called Archangel Michael, but it's not an archangel. He's actually beyond the archangels. You could say he's like the father of the archangels. But he's the head honcho of our universe. I came into contact with him. He's probably the most channeled being in the channeling world. I don't necessarily, and so that's how I began my journey. And so on the one hand, I started learning metaphysics directly from my direct experiences, and also from Michael and Goddess Saraswati. But then at some points, they wanted me to be more grounded. And they wanted me, obviously, to integrate knowledge physically. And they said the path of yoga is the highest path on earth. It's the highest path of knowledge. It's the highest path of spirituality. You know, and to back that up, like many, many years later, let me just say this. I'm absolutely certain it's true. In Hindu philosophy, which is called Sanatana Dharma, it has its roots in the Vedas, which are descriptions from India. There are 6 philosophical schools called darshanas. Yoga is actually one of those darshanas. It's the most prominent of those darshanas and the most widely practiced, the most widely followed. So yoga is the most prominent school in the greater system called Hinduism or Sanatana Dharma. The Sanatana Dharma, Hinduism, has its roots thousands and thousands of years ago. First thing that came out of it that we know of, or at least that was kind of became a solid base for it, is called the Vedas, which are the scriptures of India. Veda simply means knowledge. So you can call them books of knowledge. They're the oldest surviving scriptures still in widespread use. They're written in Sanskrit. Sanskrit is the oldest surviving language still in widespread use. And it is the foundation of Sanatana Dharma or Hinduism, which is the oldest surviving religion still in widespread use. And a lot of people didn't know that. So yoga comes out of the oldest spiritual system, the oldest scriptures, and the oldest language still in widespread use on earth today. I've studied I was guided over the years to study at least the basics of a lot of different systems. I call it integrated spirituality. So I've studied some Judeo-Christian mysticism. Obviously, I've studied a lot of metaphysics and general mysticism. I studied the basics of Taoism, the basics of Buddhism. And I just had a lot of practical experience. You know, I've not seen anything higher, deeper, or more broad than the knowledge that comes from the Vedas. In terms of understanding the nature of God, the understanding the nature of reality, the understanding the nature of spirit, the understanding the nature of the soul, the understanding how the material world works, how the mind works, and how to move from this place of illusion and even despair. Right? How about this? Humans regularly fall into despair. To remove, to transcend the plane of despair to a plane where there is no sorrow whatsoever. I haven't seen a system that can teach you that. In fact, I was talking with this Indian man once about different religions, and he said this. He said, hey, you know, wherever you are, and what you're practicing, if you're sincere, you can make advancement on any path. But at most religions talk about going to heaven. He's like, it's only Hinduism that talks about actual liberation back into the one. Meaning there's not only a heaven, but there are heavens. There are planes of heaven, there's planets of heaven. And that's just a hell, there are hells. And there's a lot in between. And what the Vedas teach is beyond all of that is the oneness, a pure state of existence. And only Hinduism and the deep mystics of every tradition know about that unitive state and how to get there. And so if you look at what's called the esoteric traditions of the world, which have to really do with internal studies of the internal world. The highest level, they're all teaching the same things, and I think Ashley was alluding to that, right? Like if you look at Rumi, he's going to be teaching the same things that Krishna and Buddha taught, just in a different way, in a different cultural setting. And he might have a different focus, right? Rumi's focus is love, and Krishna's is maybe more broad. Buddha's is controlling your mind. But you're going to see that unity beyond religion in the esoteric system. In the exoteric systems, meaning the external manifestations of religions, that's where the conflicts erupt because of human ego. In fact, that human ego, actually it says in the Bhagavad Purana, it says, goes further than I love it. And I won't get too deep, this is a super deep verse, but it says, in that supreme reality, there's no philosophical arguing or wrangling or argumentation. That reality excludes everything limited or limiting. It goes further. Wait, let me see if I can remember. I like to read them so I get them precisely, but let me see if I can pull it out from memory. It says, actually, I'll repeat. It says, in that supreme reality, there's no philosophical wrangling or argumentation, which arises only due to men's propensity to fall into illusion. That reality excludes everything limited and limiting. So those who desire to give up that which is essentially not real move systematically by negative discrimination of the extraneous to the supreme position of the one. Giving up petty materialism. I forgot the exact verse. Giving up petty materialism, they offer their love exclusively to the absolute truth within their heart, and they embrace that highest truth in fixed meditation. That's a good verse, huh? It's nice for me to recall that. That's one of my seed verses. So I suggest, you know what, I might go, maybe we'll end this series with a study of the scripture and why scripture will save your life. Imagine, actually I was a Hare Krishna for 7.5 years, and I remember when the Swami saying that. He was talking about how we used to have a practice, actually when I first joined, that we'd read scripture 1 hour a day, and then if we were distressed, afraid, angry, confused, lonely, depressed, and it would transform you, because you know what? It's called satsang. It's association with the truth. It's higher knowledge. It's wisdom. And it's readily available. And you just have to give it time. Sometimes when I channel a lot, I'll hear the deity say, give us some time. Just, how about give us some time? In fact, I was talking to my girlfriend today, and I was talking about prayer. I said I wanted to talk about prayer. Right? She's my girlfriend. I said, how often do you pray? She was like, maybe once every 2 weeks. Right? These are powerful tools. Another powerful tool is divine itself. But anyway, back to that verse. The reason I brought it, it says, so the first thing it says is that this religious divisions, it's pure egotism. It's only due to man's propensities to fall into the illusion. And that's a whole different class. Because you say, I, my system is the best. What I believe is the truth. Right? And so, trapped in that egotism, we start fighting. Going beyond that egotism to the unitive state, to the oneness. There's no fighting. There's no argumentation. You know, even in the high heavens, there may be discussion of super fine truths that are far beyond human calculation. But have you noticed, like, two people who actually have the truth, they can get along? In fact, I say this the whole time. Truth is the only basis for genuine unity. You know why? Because truth is what is real. And there's a such thing as your truth. It's called a relative truth. And then there's something called the absolute truth, which is not relative to anything. It's unchanging. And absolute truth is that you're an eternal being and that your nature is consciousness. That can never change. That is going to be the case. Say so all the time. Relative truth is you're male, she's female, right? This affects you this way. If you eat raw tomatoes, you get a stomachache. She loves them, right? So your truth is raw tomatoes are not good for you. Her truth is they're great for her, right? So that's a relative temporary truth, but it's still true, even in that temporary moment, right? And so truth is the basis for unity. In that case, if you're hanging out, don't give her, don't give him tomatoes. You eat them, right? And then you can join. But what about when somebody's trying to force your truth on you, right? What are you talking about? You don't like tomatoes? Eat them. Right? Or you shouldn't eat those tomatoes. You know, they're going to make you sick. You're like, well, I don't know if that's my experience. They will. Right? Yes.
Or when they tell you that, like, if we don't pray for you right now, you're going to go to hell. Like, I've had religious people put that kind of truth on me before.
No, not true.
Yeah, they're trying to force what they think is their truth, not necessarily the truth.
Listen, every spiritualist has to escape religion. Well, we can use that one, huh? It's true, though. Every genuinely spiritual person. The problem is, like, if you're a genuine spiritual practitioner, you're going to have to probably be a member of some religion because that's where most of the practice is and that's where most of the knowledge is. But if you're sincere, you're going to have to leave it because once you have enough knowledge and practice, you're going to realize that God is one and you're going to need to go beyond it. And most of the religions aren't having that because of their egotism. So anyway, I get sidetracked. So I got sidetracked. But what I wanted to say was, I think the point I was making about was that yoga can take you to a place where you're not having these types of debates and discussions. And wouldn't that be nice? How many people ever feel like you've reached at least a certain level of knowledge and it's tedious debating people who are convinced of some strong illusion simply because they just have not chosen to go beyond their own knowledge, that limited level of knowledge, but beyond their own ignorance, right? Yoga can take you into the company of others who are lovers of truth. And Bhakti yoga can do it very effectively. So I was saying, I was back to my story. Big loop back, boom. So my Kundalini wakes up, Michael, Saraswati become my guides. I'm learning metaphysics directly from them, secrets of the universe directly from them and from my direct experiences. They say come back to Earth. On Earth you're going to be a yogi. You're going to study yoga and practice it because that's the best thing that you can do. In fact, in the Bhagavad Gita, Krishna, who is God, says to his disciple Arjuna, strive for yoga, Arjuna, because it is the art of all work. Yoga means to control your mind to unite with God. If you want to simplify, if you need to drill something into your head, or stilling the mind. How about stilling the mind to unite with God? Because it's the art of all work. So they first sent me to a disciple of Swami Vijnanadeva, who founded the Shivananda organization. So Shivananda was a guru in India. He had multiple disciples. He sent some of those disciples to the West, and he founded actually various organizations, yoga organizations. I think the biggest and most prominent of those organizations was the one founded by Shivananda's disciple Swami Vishnu, or Swami Vijnanadevananda. He named the organization after his guru, Shivananda Organizations. Now they're internationally called International Shivananda Yoga Vedanta Centers, or something like that. In any event, Swami Vishnu had disciples. One of them was named Sarah Bess Forster, and she had a place called Sunflower Yoga in Silver Spring, Maryland. And I'm from Washington, D.C. And I was guided to Sarah Bess right after my Kundalini, woke up the year after. And I walked in, and I could immediately feel the difference. It was the first time that I saw deities. It was her own house, and she had this kind of big yoga shala as part of her house. And she had deities, statues of Hindu deities. So when my Kundalini awoke, I had never meditated. I don't even think I'd even heard of yoga. I definitely hadn't done a yoga class.
Was this from one Kundalini session?
Huh?
It was your first Kundalini session?
Which one?
The one that woke you up?
No, it wasn't any session at all. Yeah, no.
You just like at home.
No, I mean, to be honest, I was doing drugs. I was doing actually psychedelic drugs. I was taking acid and ecstasy. And the science of those is that they open your chakras. And that's how you have actually mystical experiences. Now, of course, everyone doesn't have that. My soul was primed for it. So I was actually, and somebody actually the owner of the yoga mentioned this too. They said, because I was raving, they were like, oh, you were dancing a lot. So you were engaged in a lot of physical activity. And you were opening your chakras. And my soul was primed. It was time. And so it opened, so the chakra opening boom, I came through. But to ground me, so the party was over after that. It was a wrap. And to ground me, I was sent by Goddess Saraswati to Sarabessa's yoga shala, and Sarabessa was super sweet to me. And she kind of took me in, and I became her student. And what was super nice, I was super lucky, is because Shivananda and Swami Vishnu and his organization teach what I call real yoga. So they teach yoga as it is, which is 4 main paths, one of the schools of Vedic philosophy. And so they teach that there's 4 main paths of yoga, so I started learning the 4 main paths of yoga right from the beginning. I never learned that asanas were yoga. I literally learned that asanas were yogic exercises to prepare you for meditation. And that's what they were, to prepare the body for meditation. That's what they are. That's how I learned it right from the beginning. I learned mantras right from the beginning. I learned kirtan right from the beginning. I learned about the scriptures right from the beginning. I learned about the gods of the Hindu culture right from the beginning. I learned about the gods that I was connected to. Physically, I was like right from the beginning. And so I studied with her for a little bit, and then afterwards I needed more grounding, and Michael at this time directed me to join the Hare Krishna movement. And I wound up joining the Hare Krishnas. I lived at a farm in Pennsylvania as the Hare Krishnas, and it was there that I learned Bhakti Yoga. There's also, I'm really grateful and indebted to the Hare Krishnas, because there actually I got to live it. I lived at the temple, I learned Vedic culture, gained a lot of Vedic knowledge, I studied scriptures more in depth, I learned prayers that I still say to this day, mantras that I still chant to this day, real kirtan with devotion, with bhakti in it. And I learned a lot about Indian culture and yogic culture, Vedic spiritual culture. And the Hare Krishnas practice bhakti almost exclusively. Actually, to be honest, they're not practicing bhakti exclusively because they study scriptures, which is a form of Jnana Yoga. But the Hare Krishnas are very religious. And so religious that they are competitively religious. So they're a Hindu sect. And so they have philosophical debates with other Hindu sects. And so they propose bhakti as a supreme path above all the other paths. And so a lot of the religious aspects of it, right, I wound up rejecting while trying to keep the core truths and also the many great things that I learned. But what was wonderful about engaging primarily in the practice of Bhakti Yoga is that it opens your heart and it burns the ego. Because even though it's a false philosophy, the Hare Krishnas say that you're always a servant of God, that you're not absolutely one with God, that you're one with God in essence and quality, but not as an actual being. And that contradicts the Vedas. The Vedas say there's only one being, and that being is all of us. And he's pretending to be multiple beings. And that's super clear. The Vedas are super clear. But the practice of considering myself a servant was very good for my ego. And it's actually good for a lot of people's ego. It could be good for a lot of people's ego. Because when we're normally serving, we're serving the ego. Right? I, me, my. In fact, in the Mahabharata, which is the great epic of India, of which the Bhagavad Gita, another famous text, is a small part. A character speaking, it may be Shakula or Sahadeva or Nakula, but one of them says, I, me, mine is death. We, our, us is Brahman, which means spirit. And that's what the path of Bhakti does. And that's what all these paths will do if you apply them correctly. Take you beyond the bondage and illusion of the ego. Bhakti specifically does it by considering yourself to be a servant, which we are actually, and to be honest, in the state that we're manifest in as individuals. Hare Krishna said it, and even Bob Dylan sang it. You're going to serve somebody. You're going to serve something. You have no choice. You're serving your physical body. You have to, or it'll collapse. Right? You're serving your mind and emotions, or they'll collapse. Right? For most of us, we've had to serve a boss. Right? Or else you can't feed yourself. In fact, I read this quote. It was said, if you don't follow your dreams, you're going to be working for somebody who did. Right? Anybody been in that boat or in that boat? Right? Have you noticed the way things are structured in the West? We're laborers, and we're like the money's going up. There's somebody at the top of that pyramid. If you work for a corporation or a company, then you have to be a big one. The way human beings, that's egotism. They're not acting on the oneness, and people become things to be exploited. That's egotism in the extreme. So anyway, back to I like to rant. I like to go on these little tangents against everything. And then come back. In any event, Bhakti is the path of devotion. Bhakti is the path of uniting with God by devoting yourself to God. And I am eternally grateful that I learned this with the Hare Krishnas. So, and also Shivananda actually talks about it as well. Shivananda talks about Bhakti Yoga, but the Hare Krishnas, that's their main practice. But here, let's read it. Let's go a little bit deeper into Bhakti Yoga. And it is the path of love. So there are 9 principal practices of Bhakti Yoga. The first one is called Shravanam, which means hearing. Kirtanam, which means chanting. Smaranam, which means remembering. Padasevanam, which means serving, and I'll get into what it means more specifically. These are one-word translations. They go a little bit deeper than that. Archana, worshiping. I love this one, Vandanam, which means prayer. Dashyam, considering oneself to be a servant. Sakya, considering oneself to be a friend. Then Atma Nivedanam, total self-surrender. A person in the Hare Krishna lineage named Rupa Goswami, who's a great acharya, teacher who lives by example. He said in the Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu that there are 5 potent forms of Bhakti Yoga, 5 practices also that you engage in. One is Sadhu Sangha. That means associating with saintly people. Hearing scripture. Chanting the holy name of God, names of God. So obviously it's crossover. Residing in a holy place. And worshiping the deity in the temple. So hearing is Shravanam, chanting is Kirtanam, worshiping the deity is Archanam. And so there's that crossover. Cool. So let me ask you, can you guys see how these practices will get you to God?
And they do some of them with the Kundalini, which gets you to God pretty quick.
It does. You know what? Bhakti yogis are not trying to consciously awaken the Kundalini. So I was thinking about writing that. So the other main paths, 4 major paths of yoga, called Jnana Yoga, the yoga of knowledge and devotion. Karma Yoga, which is the yoga of devoting your actions and the fruits of your actions to the divine. Meaning you're just working for the divine alone. And then what's called Ashtanga Yoga, which is the 8-fold path of yoga, which is the path of bodily and mental control, leading to meditation, meaning to union. So typically, and then out of those 4 main paths, there's different systems that are focusing on different things. And of course, there's also ones that integrate everything. The truth is, those 4 paths are more a description of what I call Eka Yoga. Ek means one. Truth is, there's really one way to unite with God, and that's to devote yourself to her. And when we talk about God, remember, we're talking about your higher self, your highest self, the one true self of all beings. We're not saying devote yourself to something outside of yourself. We're saying devote yourself to your true self. That's what God is. And so Kundalini Yoga right, is, I would say, a path that integrates things that are going to be more found on the Ashtanga path, and then also Bhakti path. But they're all using Bhakti, but they're all using all four anyway. But if you're specifically trying to awaken the Kundalini, that'll usually be through Hatha yoga practices, which have come out of the Ashtanga path.
Yeah, I wasn't so much talking about the yoga, I was talking about like when I did a Kundalini retreat, there was a lot of the chanting and...
Okay.
Yeah, that's what I mean. So they do, yeah, some of that.
Right, and this is, I think, a good reason why. How about this? Shankaracharya was a great Indian teacher, and many consider him to be, including myself, an incarnation of Lord Shiva. So in the Vedic system, actually, and this should be super clear, the supreme Godhead manifests principally as three beings. Actually, on the male side, there's Brahma, Vishnu, Shiva. Right? That's called the Hindu Trimurti. Brahma, Vishnu, Shiva. Brahma is called the creator of the universe. Vishnu is the preserver. Shiva is the destroyer. Right? And he recycles the universe. Then on the female side, there's Shakti, Devi, who is Durga, or Parvati. Parvati is in the how would you say, symbolic system of Hinduism, the wife of Shiva. So it's mother and father of Godhead. Krishna is a form of Vishnu, so it gets super complicated with the deities. But going back to the Kundalini and the Bhakti. So Shankaracharya is considered an incarnation of Shiva. Shankaracharya is famous because actually what happened was Buddha, everyone know that, does everyone know, and this is actual fact, that Buddhism is actually just a branch of Vedic knowledge, that Buddhism came out of the Vedas, that Buddha was a Hindu, right, right, in India, and really he's not teaching anything that's not in the Vedas. It's just that what happened was he wanted to focus on certain things, and then other things he disputed, right? There's certain aspects of religions that he disputed, and then he wanted to focus on other things. And Buddha essentially created a system that didn't depend on, human beings tend toward bhakti. Because at the end of it, when they're trying to approach God, the natural tendency is because they feel small and they need to call out. Right? And they want to devote themselves to that. That actually occurs naturally. What happens is, like, if you go, and you see this, when you go too far into one path, you might neglect the other paths. So the Buddha was very much into wisdom, which is Jnana Yoga. Right? He was like saying, you need to understand things. Right? And so with the bhaktas, sometimes you'll hear them talking about, oh, I don't need this higher knowledge, I only need you, Lord. That'll work if your bhakti is Shuddha. I mean, actually, Paramashuddha, that means supremely pure. If your bhakti is not Paramashuddha, you could use some knowledge. And almost none of us have absolute bhakti for the divine. It's hard to get that. And even if you do, Krishna himself says, amongst all the yogis, the one who is, I forgot the term he uses, elevated or pure in both knowledge and devotion, he is the most intimately united with me. That is my opinion. So Krishna says the highest yogi, the one who has attained the highest path, is the one who is both wisdom and devotion and action and self-control. So this is what I actually used to teach, something called Eka Yoga. That yoga is one and you need all of them. But the Kundalini, the chanting, what it does is it purifies the heart and ego because you're devoting it to something. Because the ego, as Julie was saying, can slip in. It's always trying to take claim and credit for the good stuff. So if you practice bhakti sincerely, you can devote yourself to it. Also, quite frankly, the chanting is super purifying. Chanting the names of God, the very vibration of that is super purifying, can be super protective. It'll transform your consciousness. And so, yeah, I appreciate that. I haven't studied Kundalini yoga as taught by Yogi Bhajan, but every time I've heard something about it, it's been relatively positive, and every time I've met practitioner. You know what I mean? And again, I haven't gone deep enough to speak authoritatively on it, but I do appreciate it. Cool. All right, but how can this help you get to God? How can it help you control your mind? Any of it? Anyone?
Or if you're around saintly people, and you're chanting the holy names of God, it's all pretty straightforward that you would be more one with God and more pure.
Why would associating with saintly people be important?
Because you would share the same truths or similar truths, and you would be wanting to support and help each other, not bring each other down or non-purify the mind, like poison each other's minds. You would just be able to keep moving on your path and stay focused.
Ashley's legit, huh? Basically what she's saying is your environment shapes your consciousness. And the number one aspect of your environment is who you're hanging out with.
Yes.
And so if your goal is to find your true self, you need to be around people who are at least attempting that. Better to be around people who are further along the path than you. That's the best way. In fact, not only is it the best way, they say it's the safest way. It actually talks about this in terms of a spiritual teacher. It says a genuine guru, a person, or even I don't know if you use the term guru, it may use the term someone who's genuinely united with God, who's turned it over so that their life is for God. They say even a moment's association with such a saint can save and redeem us, because it can actually spark a transformation. Even if in that moment, right, you're not miraculously healed of all your ills, it can spark a transformation that takes you from here to here. So they say even a moment association of a genuine saint can save and redeem us. I'll go further. I'm going to read something, and actually, you know what? You can look up the video if you check our website. We have this as a video online, and it's called The Actual Secret of Spiritual Enlightenment. So again, this is Krishna speaking. And what's nice about this is in a book called the Uddhava Gita. Also, all these scriptures that I'm mentioning, because I say scriptures are good, you get them as free PDF downloads on our website as well. And there's a link to another resource called, oh God, what's it called? There's an online repository of all the world's major scriptures. There's thousands of them. And you can read them for free online, or you can buy like a DVD for $99. There's some people who are dedicated to preserving the world's history. It's a link to that on our website too if you go to Resources, Scriptures. And I can't remember the website's name for some reason.
I think it's called Sacred Text.
Yes!
Yeah.
Thank you.
Sacred Text. Yeah,
Sacred-text.com. It's a repository of all the world's scriptures. You can read any scripture you want online for free, or you can buy the DVD for like $99. And it's awesome. I love it. They're so awesome. They have various versions of scripture too. But I have a few ones that you can download directly as well for free on the website. Anyway, the point is this one's there. It's called the Uddhava Gita. And this is Krishna speaking to his friend and cousin Uddhava. And he says, O beloved child of the Yadus, now I will tell you the most secret of all secrets, the most confidential of all knowledge. I tell it to you because you have ever been my most faithful servant and friend. Listen now as I tell you the actual secret of spiritual enlightenment. Neither yoga nor philosophically analyzing the nature of existence, nor attempting to adhere to the path of truth and righteousness, nor studying the scriptures, nor performing austerities, nor renunciation, nor performing pious acts in order to serve others and the world as a whole, nor giving in charity, nor taking vows of fasting, nor acts of ritualistic worship, nor chanting secret mantras, nor visiting holy places of pilgrimage, nor following the moral and philosophical codes of conduct given in the scriptures. None of these will bring me under control so much as association with those who are already in truth. In each and every age, satsang is the supreme means of salvation. Sat means truth, sangha means a community, coming to the communion. So he says in each and every age, all those yoga practices, you need them for your own purification, your own advancement. He says, however, he says this, he says two things about the best thing to do. If you want to reduce it, I love how they give all these things to do. Once the Buddha was surrounded by his disciples and he gave them all these things to do, and one of the disciples at once, they were looking downcast. The Buddha said, "What's wrong?" One of the disciples said, "Master, it's too hard, you can't do it." What do you think the Buddha said? He said, "Do your best." I love that, because there's so much to do on this path, right? What I think God says is, get on the path, do your best. But then she reduces it to two practices that'll get you home. If you just do these things. Krishna says the best spiritual practice is to think of me always. And so you don't have to think of the form of Krishna if that's not your particular Ishta Devata. That means your chosen form of the divine. If Krishna is your chosen form of the divine, then think of him always. But there's multiple, the divine manifests an infinite amount of forms, as long as it's the pure divine, as long as it's God, a form of God. It says, think of me always. The Bible says, pray unceasingly. That means don't stop praying. Not once every 2 weeks. Right? Rumi, he said, fish like us need the ocean around us all the time. Right? And then he says, the best spiritual practice to think of me always. And then he says, the actual secret of spiritual enlightenment is satsang, to come together with those who are in truth. And the reason is this, because your environment shapes your consciousness. Paramahamsa Yogananda wrote in Autobiography of a Yogi, he said, environment trumps willpower. That means it defeats willpower. And it's funny, when I first read that, it struck me because we have this idea that, hey, I can make it no matter what. I can push through the environment. He says, no. He says, even great yogis, they can't stay exclusively in a particular environment without succumbing to it. So I've learned there's 4 things about environment. You only have these 4 options. If you have a particular vibration and the environment has a different vibration, and you're immersed in that environment, and you want your environment to stay the same, or you want to change your environment, or you want to change your vibration, meaning you want a particular vibration, and the vibration in your environment is not that vibration you want yourself to be in. So you can either change the environment to match the vibration that you are or that you want. That's going to be hard in most cases, especially if you didn't create the environment. You can leave the environment and seek an environment favorable to you that matches your vibration. Or you can surrender to the environment and become like that vibration. The only 4th option is you can find a niche, a cubbyhole of protection. Right? Maybe some friends like you, maybe a temple in the midst of this desert of materialism. Right? And you can go to that and use it as shelter. But eventually, you're going to have to do one of those 3 things. You're going to have to create an environment that matches your vibration. either there or somewhere else. So change it, leave it, or succumb to it. It's the same with your association. It's the secret. If all else fails, get into satsang. And then just think of God. If you do that, you'll do these other things. Have you noticed that? Have anyone ever noticed that? The more you think of the divine, the more you're led into prayer, into chanting, into scriptural study, into association with the saintly. So that's how you begin. So let's go over this. Let's talk about it a little bit more. What is hearing? Hearing is just what we think it is. It's hearing about God. So if you want to unite with God, the first thing you need to do is hear about her. Does that make sense? And it's not just that. Oh, wait a minute. I want to read what it says is, hearing the names of God chanting, hearing philosophy of sacred scriptures, hearing stories about God and her activities. Krishna says, in the Bhagavad Gita, he says, those who are devoted to me gain great pleasure in always conversing about me and in enlightening one another about my nature. Right? So again, like the scriptures that I came up studying were from the Hare Krishna, so there's going to be a lot of Krishna in them, and they work. You know, actually, some of these scriptures are so potent that somebody said even if you could get one line of it, you could be liberated. If you can live one line, remember that verse I just said? Those who desire to give everything essentially not real move systematically, right? If you could do that, you could get liberated. The point is, it's enough. The Bhagavad Gita is enough. The Uddhava Gita is enough. He says, and so he's talking as God. And so God can be in many forms, but he says, and how many people have experienced this? How many people have experienced when you are able to step out of this material mindset, that discussions with God are pleasing. Discussions of the truth, of spirituality, they're pleasing. In fact, they go so far as to say they're amrit. They're nectar. How many people have actually experienced that? Anyone? It's like nectar, right? You know why? Because there's no sorrow in it. It's absolute. Only spirit is absolute. The material world, pain alternates with pleasure automatically. And whenever your mind is on the material platform, whenever you're seeking happiness from external things, pain is going to be a part of the process. It's automatic. But in the absolute, that duality doesn't exist. And it's hard to get there, especially now we're in what's called the Kali Yuga, the age of darkness. But we say it's worth it. And so hear about the divine. Also, the more you hear about it, the more you taste that nectar, the more you're going to want it. What will happen is this too: the more you hear about it, and then when you go out and you hear mundane things, you'll see the vibration. The vibration will plummet, right? It's going to be like disappointing, right? So the first thing, hear. Next one, kirtanam, chant. So that's going to go. I'm going to go further than chanting. So you can chant the names of God in kirtan. How many people know this? Actually, how about this? How many people go to kirtan? Anyone? How many people have no idea what they're saying most of the time? Me too. But I have learned this. Most of what they're saying are just names of gods, right? It's literally, say it's a song of Ganesh. Usually it's just a Ganesh and different names of Ganesh, which mean different things. So you're invoking Ganesh with this particular quality, like Varakratanda, right? Varakratanda means he of the crooked tusk, but symbolically it means he who makes crooked paths straight. That's what Ganesh does. He makes crooked things straight. So if you need help straightening out your life, or even your physical body, it says you chant this mantra, Om Rakatadaya Hum, or his name, and sometimes in kirtans it comes up. So it's invoking him like that. So all the gods have hundreds of names, if not 1,008, some of them, and it's just different names of God chanting. That's the main thing. That's mostly what kirtan is. And then sometimes there's invocations to protect me, or to shelter me, or to guide me, to enlighten me. But usually, I would say almost 90% of it is just names of God. So if you can figure out which deity you're praying to, then you'll know that you're just repeating her or his name over and over again. So that's one way. Kirtana, you chant it, speaking, but it's also speaking about God. You know why? What we're trying to do. Remember, what's the goal of yoga? What's the goal of yoga?
To have union with love.
Right, how?
Through the stillness of the mind.
Right. And so by thinking about God constantly, the mind calms down. Speaking about God makes you think about God. The mind calms down. Can you see how yoga is a science? Yoga is a science to extricate your soul from material illusion. It's scientific. It works on the mind. So speak. So first thing is hear about God. Second is to chant God's name and speak about God. Third, smaranam. Remember God. We talked about that. Fourth, pada sevanam. Pada sevanam means actually serving the lotus feet of God. So the lotus is big in Vedic culture, right? The lotus. Reason is everyone knows what a lotus flower is. So it grows in ponds, right? The roots are at the bottom of the pond, and the pond is usually dark, murky, right? So the reason is this seed that's in darkness and buried underwater has the wherewithal to sprout up out of the water, break the water's surface, and open up into this beautiful flower and receive sunlight. So it says that's how we should be, right? The ability to force our way up out of the darkness and into the light. So lotus is a big thing. Lotus feet are a big thing. It gets crazy into the science of it, but feet are important to carry energy. And so you'll hear a lot of people talk about the holy feet of my guru, or the holy feet of the divine mother, right? That's why. And so the lotus feet also, meaning these blessed feet. So pada sevana means serving the lotus feet of the Lord. And that means, you know how you can serve? Find out something. This is how I would do it. I would do it. Pray first, find out what God wants, and do that. Find out. And you know what? Here's the thing. You might not be able to hear directly, like I can channel and deities can talk to me. It'll come, no. If you want it enough, it'll come. It'll arrange that. Everyone found that? Like, you know what I mean? Like, if you actually take the time to tap in, the divine will be like, glad I got you. Let's go here. Let's do this. Move into a position of making that your life. Then you can unite. Archana. Archana means worshiping God in the form of the deity or murti in the temple. So a deity's form is the statue. It's called a murti, right? I want to briefly touch on this. So, as you know, Hindus and many other religions actually worship this form, right? You know, it's ignorant. God, I still have Christian friends like this, Christian family like this. They're like, you're worshiping idols. I'm like, idiot, shut up. I'm sorry. Sometimes that's how I feel. And it's actually true. Here's what they don't understand. They don't even know the history of their religion, how Christianity came about, right, from Judaism. Judaism was just another local religion in the deserts of, what is, broadly that Arabian area, right? and when it was Canaan. So there's all these competing religions, and all system, everyone worshiped. What is the physical, if you're physically embodied, it's helpful to have something physical to focus on. So all spiritual systems used forms of God, and they would pray to that form. And of course, sometimes they'd forget to go beyond the form, right? Because humans are like that, right? But it's not that this statue is the thing. It's the thing that the statue is representing. And also not just that, the spirit of a being can come into the statue and receive that worship. Has everyone ever experienced that? Everyone's experienced looking at a picture and being like, whoa, right? Everyone's experienced that. Something's coming through that picture, right? So these are vessels for spirit to come through. But in any event, Judaism, and the great destiny that it had, they were the first ones who proposed in that area monotheism. There's forget about all these gods, worship this one God. And do away with your idols, because this God is too far beyond these statues. And of course, a lot of these religions weren't even worshiping beings of light. They were worshiping evil beings. Baal, right, who's a total demon, right? And so, to combat that demonry and also the ignorance that went along with that type of worship, they banned idol worship in their religion, right? Not understanding that it doesn't have to be an idol. It can be a form. An idol is something that you put before God, or you worship instead of God. But a form is a form that you use to worship the inner truth of God. And so Archanam is worshiping in the deity in the temple. And because you can see it physically. But knowing that the spirit is behind that.
So is it like a focal point?
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. And not just for you, but there's a science to these prayers and mantras. They open a gate for the divinity to come in and settle into that deity. No worries, thank you. So they settle into that form. And you can feel that. Has anyone ever been in a temple and felt a deity and the energy that's emanating? Have you done that, Julia?
In India, in the Jain temple, it's like the Drishti practice.
Yeah, but you can feel it feeding back to you.
Yeah.
Yeah, once you actually experience it, it's not a debate anymore, if you're open to it. So, all right. So that's Archanam. What do we got next? Bandhanam. Man, I want to do a whole class on Bandhanam. I get mad at you. You neglect prayer. You neglect it. You act that God doesn't exist unless your leg is broke. Right? You're busy. I say this all the time. The divine is your ace in the hole. For those who don't know that phrase, Americans play card games, right? And the ace, right, is the best card in every game, right? So Americans are cheaters. Ace in the hole is the ace that you keep in your pocket or up your sleeve, just for when you need it, right? And so that's fine. But it's your trump card is what it's called. So trump means to win, right? The ace is your trump card that you pull when you need it. That's the divine. But of course, the more you get familiar with this card, the more it can be a regular presence in your life. Having said that, the higher up you go, the obstacles become bigger too. So I'm not saying it's all going to be easy. What I mean is, if you seek God, she'll be seeking you. Rumi said this. What you seek is seeking you. And we can call out. This book called The Warrior Song of King Gesar, the Buddhist book I have, it says, it is from our hearts that we cry out. Rumi said, cry out in your weakness. They exist. God herself exists, and she also has manifested from her many, many divine beings who are existing in higher realms who know us far better than we could ever know ourselves in these forms, and they exist and they're ready to help. But beings of light never interfere with free will. So if you're not interested, you can be left to your own devices. You show your interest through your bhakti. Call out. Right? Remember I said the Bible says you should pray unceasingly. It is an underused tool. The divine herself is an underused resource. She's a mother, a father, a friend. In fact, there's a famous Vedic prayer. It's very devotional. It says, Twameva mata chapita twameva, twameva bandusha saka twameva, twameva vijam dravinam twameva, twameva sarvam mama deva deva. It means only you are my mother, only you are my father, only you are my relative, only you are my friend, only you are my wealth, only you are my wisdom. You alone are everything to me, O God of gods. She can make up the difference. You just have to have bhakti to cross that moat. All right, let's move on quickly.
Can I ask a question?
Yes.
So what you just said, that is the only the wisdom, the financial, everything like that. But then isn't that one? Like, aren't we all one with the God? Like, I'm just so confused.
Right, so here's what it is. In this form right now, let's be honest, we appear to be separate. If you get angry, your consciousness is still conditioned by the material environment. So from this place, we need to call out to that which is beyond that conditioning. That's what we're calling God. Even though God is our true self and we're one with it, we're not living consciously in that oneness right now.
Do we have to call it God? Because in my conditioning, I have such a bad stigma conditioned to the name God from where I've been brought up.
Yeah, here's what I would suggest.
Yeah.
Get rid of the conditioning, because then you're free of it.
Okay.
Right? And then the term God won't bother you. And this is why I'm reclaiming the term God from the ignorant and the hypocrites. Because everyone agrees, not that everyone can agree what God is, but everyone can agree that the term God indicates the supreme, that there's nothing higher. So I'm not going to cede that term to religions because they've described it incorrectly, they've pretended like they were devoted to it and they weren't. Whatever the reason, we might have this adversity, you know what I mean, in hearing the name God. I'll reclaim it, and I'll be free of their conditioning. And I will know, when I talk about God, I'm talking about the oneness. I'm talking about my highest self. I'm talking about nature. I'm talking about existence. And I'm talking about, from this individual perspective, my father and my mother, my source. So I'm talking about all of that. I don't forget that. So I would say get rid of the conditioning. Don't adapt yourself to the conditioning, right? Challenge it. So take it back with you.
Are there ethics of prayer that need to be taken into consideration?
Ooh, that is so good. Oh my God, we wrote that. Didn't we write that? Didn't we write something on the website? Should we read it up? Yes, there's actually good. We have actually the power of prayer we just came up with.
From Shivananda, I think. I think he talks about it.
Good, but didn't I have something too? Did you put it up? Remember we had like the 5 things?
Yeah.
Is that up there?
Yeah.
Should we look at? All right, here's why, Julia. You know what? I'm always trying to like summarize things, and the summary came to me. I got the download, and I told Sada, I was like, we need to get this up. So Sada got it up. So let's see. I totally forgot what it was. But I mean, yeah, of course we can go on. Of course, there's the main thing about prayer. Actually, yeah, let me get this up because I actually summarized it, so I don't need to speculate. But I'll say this before we get to it. I know I wrote this. The main thing in prayer, and the main thing is anything, is your intention and your consciousness. How about this? Purity is greater than strength. Purity means one thing. Meaning if a person who's apparently weak only wants God, a person who's apparently strong, they want 50% they want God and 50% they want the material world, each are going to get what they want. And it may appear that the strong person is ahead. In the end, that's why Jesus said, the meek will inherit the earth, the last shall be first. That pure devotion will cause God to act. And that action will free. So is it under teachings?
Yeah.
All right. Power of prayer.
Yes.
How to make prayer effective. Purity of intent. Meaning I don't want anything else. Also, purity of intent means, how about this? It's for you. It's very common to petition for your own self in prayer. You know what I have here is, I have in my book, The Nature of Things. And in this, we have so many of these things, like, so God, remember I told you my Kundalini woke and God started talking to me as a guide. I had 2 years sabbatical in India, and I had questions for the divine. And I wanted answers. What is truth? What is love? What is prayer? And these are my questions to Goddess Saraswati. So maybe we'll read that too. Here's the thing. Does anyone need to go? What I mean is we're over time already. And I don't want to. Oh, satsang! It's nectar. Okay.
Eventually.
Yeah.
No, I mean, because I've got to check out.
Yeah, we all eventually. 20 years later, Keon's here. Grandma's like, we were trying to get him out for 2 years. Agreed. Eventually, we all got to go. Everyone okay with that? Okay. So purity of intent. One way you make your intentions pure is you devote it to God. So I heard the best two prayers are, thank you, and what would you have me do? Thank you. I hated to hear this one. Ooh, it was like a knife to the gut when I heard this. I heard, thank you means I'm ready for more. And until you can actually say thank you for your hardships, for your troubles, your difficulties, and genuinely feel it, you haven't learned the lesson, you're not done. I heard that when I was definitely unthankful for my hardships. I was not stoked. Definitely not in this place of gratitude. But I recognize that. Shoot, think about it. Have you ever done that? Have you ever gotten to a point where you're like, oh, thank you for that. You're finished, right? Now you can move on to something else, and you get the blessing from the trouble. So thank you, right? That means you're acknowledging the good side. That's something I need to practice more, right? And then what would you have me do? That's surrendering the ego to the divine. So that's what purity of intent is. Let your intention be one of surrender rather than petition. Jesus said, your Father in heaven already knows what you want. In fact, there's a great lecture by Dr. Tony Evans, who is a Christian minister. I do have a little beef with Dr. Evans because he has this idea that if you're not a member of Christian religion, he said you have no access to grace. I want to meet Dr. Evans and have a discussion about that. But, and it shows you this, people with great wisdom can say some really stupid shit. But he does. Apart from that, he actually is very tuned in. And he has something called Getting Through the Enemy's Lines with Prayer. And it's a great lecture if you want to hear about it. He talks about how prayer works. And he basically says the best way to pray is to pray for something God has already said he's going to do. Because you can't really change the will of God. He already knows everything beforehand. So he knows what you need, what you're going to ask for, what he's going to give you. How many people have had their prayers unanswered? Right. Me too. There's a story, I heard that this is a story from Gary Zhukov's book Seed of the Soul, and I'm not sure, I never read it, but this is what I heard. In the book, apparently, he writes a story of a little girl, and apparently it's her birthday, so her dad really wants to please her. So her dad's like, hey sweetheart, what do you want for your birthday? And she goes, I'm going to ask God to make it snow. Father was like, because it was the summer and they lived in Arizona or something like that. And he didn't want his daughter to be heartbroken or to have a rupture in her relationship with the divine. So he tried to make up for it. He bought all types of presents and stuff, hoping to distract her from the fact that it was not going to snow this summer in Arizona. Right? And she's happily playing with her gifts on her birthday. And he's shocked. He's like, wow. So he goes and he says, sweetheart, didn't you ask God to have it snow on your birthday? She goes, yeah. He said no. So having purity of intent also means to know that if you are aligning with the divine, then whatever you get is what you need at that time, and to go into that blessing. And this is faith, and this is trust, which is a whole nother class. And so that's how you make your prayer pure.
What is it that you just said, when aligned with the divine?
Oh, read more. What you got? Where is it?
It was from how the girl the little girl, God said no to her, and then you said, so in that sense, when you're aligned with the divine.
With the divine will, when you're surrendered to the divine will, you're not going to be as distressed. And it goes back to thank you. What I said was basically, when you're aligned with the divine will, then you accept that whatever you have on your path is what you need right now. Which is a hard one to accept, to remember. This is why this constant surrender has to take place over and over again. So, purity of intent. So that's purity of intent. Number 2, intensity of focus. Give you an example. Say I'm talking to Sada, and then I'm stopping to talk to Ashley. Then I'm stopping and talking to Rania. Then I come back to Sada. Right? And then Sada is talking to me. And while she's talking, I turn my attention to Ashley. Ashley starts talking to turn. Right? Like, how's that connection? How's the other person feeling? And God, she don't need you, turns out. And so, intensity of focus and purity of intent causes God to move. What I heard was this: the way to conquer God. You want to know how to turn God into your servant? Pure love and exclusive devotion. He says that those who have devoted themselves to the divine exclusively, the Bible says He will give His archangels charge over you, and they will lift you up in their hands, lest you dash your foot against a stone. He says once you actually turn yourself over to the divine takes your life into its hands. And it may take you through hell as purification, but it's still, you're still in hands. She'll take you down and she'll bring you up. Rumi said, and he's talking as God. He goes, I made the lock and I made the key. So whether you're down in a hole or up in a tree, consider me, for I am the key of the way. So, purity of intent, intensity of focus. Don't have your mind be divided. Krishna actually goes further. He says, those who are on this path are resolute in purpose and their aim is one. The mind of the irresolute is many-branched. So for those for whom English isn't the first language, I'll translate that a little bit better. He said, those who are on this path of union with me are resolute in focus. That means resolute means there's nothing else interfering in your focus. It means you're absolutely determined. Resolute determination means absolute determination. And you're not going back. When you make a resolution, like if you ever heard this New Year's resolutions, like this is what I'm going to do. It's something resolved. Boom, it's done. So those who are in this path are resolute in purpose. That means you're solid. I'm not doing anything else. And their aim is one. The mind of the irresolute, that means those who aren't determined. The minds of those who aren't determined are many-branched. They go in many directions. All right. I'm trying to actually get out of here in a decent amount of time, but there's so many stories that come up to illustrate this. Thank you. There's a story of Krishna's best friend Arjuna, and he's learning archery from Drona, along with his cousins and his brothers. And the Acharya, who's the teacher, puts a wooden bird in a tree, and it's multicolored, and it's got everything a bird has. He calls the students up one by one and he says to the first one, tell me what you see. And he's like, and the first one's like, I see the sky, I see the tree, I see the bird. It's like, stand down, you won't be able to hit the target. And he calls them up. The other people are like, I see the tree, stand down, I see the branch, what are you down? When it finally gets to Arjuna, somebody says, I see the bird, he says, stand down. He gets to Arjuna. Because the task is to shoot the arrow through the bird's eye. He says, tell me what you see, Arjuna. And he goes, Guru, and I forgot the bird's eye paraphrasing, but he says, Guru, I see the bird's eye. And the Guru's like, do you see the sky? No, Guru. Do you see the tree? No, Guru. Do you see the branch the bird is on? No, Guru. Do you see the bird's body? No, Guru. I only see its eye. He says, release your shaft. Release your shaft. Shaft goes through the bird's eye. Bird falls. Arjuna is the best of all the warriors. Why? His focus. Have you noticed that this is a quality of great people? People who accomplish great things, they have the ability to focus on one thing when they decide to do it. And they can devote all their energies to that one thing. That's how you make your prayer effective. First you have pure intent, which is to serve. And then you have pure focus, which means nothing else. I'm not bargaining with you, God. I'm yours. You know what I mean? I'm not going to be distracted right now because Dante's about to call me. Like you're praying, but you're like, oh man, wait a minute. The show's going to come on. Right? Boom. The other one is constancy. How much are you praying? Are you praying unceasingly? It's quantity. So we're talking about quality and quantity. And the other was amount of time. You get greater results the more time you put in. The deities say, spend some time with me. You get to know people the more time you spend with them. Right? So those are the 4 ways to make prayer effective. Purity of intent, intensity of focus, constancy, and the amount of time. I pretty much at this point, I'm channeling almost all the time, or at least the deities have gotten to the point where they can use me anytime they want. And things are coming through. Ivana, have you ever been to higher self meditation?
I was at time that Sarasvati. Remember?
Okay, yeah. You know what? I don't plan it. I have no idea what's going to happen. Usually what's annoying, sometimes they'll give me an idea of who's going to come before, sometimes not. When I'm sitting there doing my intro, sometimes I don't even know who's coming. I don't know what we're going to do exactly. I simply open up and I just go into the zone and it all comes out. And I was telling Sada, it never fails. You know why? Because Ganesh don't fail. Right? Saraswati does not fail. Right? The only way it could fail is if I fail to get out the way. Right? And after 24 years of torture, I learned to get out the way. But anyway, the point I'm making about that is this is the prayer I learned to say. And so this is why that happens. And I came up with this stuff. It says, God, please don't let me say anything. This is all on the website if you don't want to write it down. God, please don't let me say anything that you would not have me say. Please don't let me fail to say anything that you would have me say. Please don't let me say anything as you would not have me say it. In other words, please just take over and speak through me. Lord, please don't let me do anything that you would not have me do. Please don't let me fail to do something that you would have me do. Please don't let me do anything as you would not have me do it. In other words, please just take over my actions and act through me. That's what I feel about prayer.
So when is this class?
Tomorrow, 5:30.
In Australia.
You know, we have it online for free. We need to send out, are you in the mailing list yet?
Yeah.
Okay, yeah, we need to send this out to tell people. Like, we've got so many resources and we're going to have so many more and they're all free. Scriptures, how many meditations do we have up so far, Sada?
Probably like 7 or 8 maybe.
Higher self meditations?
Some of them are Sacred Heart.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, we got more that we can put up, right?
Yeah.
These need to kind of review.
Yeah.
Yeah. So there's 7 or 8 of those meditations already online. And we know what we're going to do is we're actually, you know what, we need more help. We should get some volunteers on. Because we have a YouTube channel. And we're actually going to put them on YouTube too.
Yeah.
Will you write down your website?
I'll give you a card after class. Cool. All right, let's move on. Let's wrap this up. So then, these are the basic ones. Then you move to Dasham. Considering yourself to be a servant. This is when you're entering into the intimacies of a relationship with God. The first stage is you consider yourself a servant. That means, okay, in the beginning, first you're serving. Now you're like, okay, I'm yours. I'm your servant. The next stage is to be a friend. And has everyone noticed that like an intimate servant actually becomes a friend? Right? And that person will know that person in ways that the public won't. Right? This is how it is with God when you enter into this secret relationship. Rumi said, he said, all the prophets have said, how long do we have to beat this cold iron? Basically, I forgot the full poem, but he says basically, how long do we have to suffer? Right? Because God, for those who are called, He puts you through trials. No escaping it. Because if you want to be a vessel of the divine, you have to be purified and then strengthened. So he says, how long do we have to pound this cold iron? And then Rumi goes on to say how it's worth it. And then he says, be a companion. Now he says, work in the invisible at least as hard as you do in the visible. Be a companion to the prophets, even if no one here knows that you are. You know what? For almost 20 years, I was interacting with the gods of the universe, archangels, angels, and a whole range of different beings. And no one knew. And I remember, like, I was toiling somewhere, I forgot where, just nothing had manifested externally for me. And I remember saying, I was praying, and I said, you know what, it feels like you guys wasted. I mean, why put me through all this? Why make me learn all of this? Do you know what I mean? I've been doing this every day for hours. And you know what I mean? Like, you're just gonna die, just gonna dissipate into nothing. And I was just like, God, you know, I was like, I've been beating this cold iron. I've been a companion to the prophets. I've been working in the invisible way harder than the physical. And then Gabriel came to me, and Gabriel said, oh no, the plan is still on. Like, we have not put you through all that for nothing. And everything's on track. Keep suffering. Okay, and then Atma Nivedanam, total self-surrender. That's when you just give everything up. Everyone that heard this famous phrase, it's easier for a camel to pass through the eye of a needle than it is for a rich man to enter heaven. Has anyone ever heard that? No, that's from Jesus said that. Now, what do you think of that? Disappointing, huh? Because all of us want a little money, right? Like, Ashley, it's like, that sucks.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, that might be poetic license, but the point is, this is where that story came from. Jesus was getting popular. So a wealthy young man comes to him, wealthy and young. He says, Master, Rabbi, I want to be your disciple. I want to follow you. Jesus said, okay, sell everything you own, everything. Give the money to the poor and then come be my disciple. What do you think the young wealthy man said?
No.
Nothing. He put his head down and walked away. And that's when Jesus said, it is easier for a camel to pass through the eye of a needle than it is for a rich man to enter the kingdom of God. If you're too attached to material things, you can't approach the divine. I'll go even further. To the extent that you're attached to material things, and I'll go even further. Your ideas of things, your material relationships. To that extent, you can't approach the pure divine. It's not possible. So at the end, if you want merger with the divine, you have to give it up. Give up everything to the divine, and that's how you get home. So remember, also residing in a holy place, even if he says that's a very potent form of scripture. He says actually, even if you have no faith in any of these, he says even if you don't have faith in any of these 5 practices, by doing them, dormant love of God will awaken in your heart. Rupa Goswami says that. But even you can't find a holy place. I'm going to say this to everyone. I feel like I'm being divinely pushed to tell you. Find a place that's favorable. When people ask me, why am I in Bali? It's because Ubud specifically, not even all of Bali, is favorable to my vibration, who I am and what I want to do. You know why? Because there's ceremonies going on all the time. These people are following these things all the time. And that's what I'm doing. I'm trying to do in my own poor little way. And so I would say to all of you, wherever you are right now in your path, the best thing you could probably do for yourself is to find a favorable environment, because also it's getting heavier out there. It's getting uglier out there. It's getting dark out there. I never check in with things. I mean, I can't say never, but like usually actually once every few months. Just, I dropped out. You know why? How about this? Leave it for 6 months and go back and see if they're not talking about the same types of things.
Oh, it's true. I go back on Facebook after years, and it's literally exactly the same.
It's the same things.
It's the same.
Over and over again. It's been the same for hundreds of freaking years.
Yeah.
I was just like, I'm out. What else is there? Oh, the divine. It's a game. It's a racket. They want your consciousness. Like there's a fight on for your soul out there. Right? And how did it get to the soul? The mind. Right? And I was just like, oh my God, this, like, what it is I used to be so into it. And I used to be a social justice warrior. Can you imagine me? Definitely, right? I used to rail against everything. Right? And then I realized there's not going to be a revolution because the people don't have the consciousness for it. These people are eating Cheetos on their phone. They're zapped in. Right? You used to go to family of 4, go to dinner. What happens?
Yeah.
Right? These people ain't revolting. George Orwell said, until they become conscious, they will not revolt. And until they revolt, they cannot become conscious. So they're doomed. Anyway.
I'm always reminded of that they always talk about the Mother Teresa and how I think it's Mother Teresa, and she said she will never go to a protest or anything like that, but if there's ever a peace rally, she will be there, because it's not about fighting and fighting and fighting with the people that are unconscious. I'm always reminded of that.
Well, I think you have to do a little fighting. And if you look at all the greats, I mean, it's up to you. It depends on your path. If that was her path, that's fine. But if you look at the greats, Gandhi and but you have to pick your battles. The real thing is go to the mind and see what she wants to do. The reason I was saying that is it's getting bad out there and it's set to get worse. So the 3 things we need to devote ourselves to the divine is we need to reside in a place that's favorable with people who are favorable. We need to think of God all the time, and we need to pray unceasingly. But even to think of God all the time and to pray unceasingly, that's going to be hard unless you get into satsang and unless you're living in a favorable environment. How about this? People come to Ubud and they get better, and then they leave and get worse again. Right? I'm not saying Ubud is for everyone, but I'd say live in a place in which you get healthier and happier. Like because there's so much pushing you towards unhealth and unhappiness, right? Especially in the West. Do you realize how many drugs people need to just get by in the West?
Yeah.
Like half the population is on antidepressants, and the other half on other drugs, right? I mean, not all. Like 80% of the people are on drugs just to get by, one form or another. Maybe 85. When you add in, like, what do you call it, porn addiction, which I didn't know was a thing, but apparently that's a massive thing there. And then video game addiction. It's absurd. People are living fantasy lives. Their souls are being sucked away. So get into a favorable environment, be around saintly people, think of God.
And for the next generation, we just surround, like having a child, do we just surround them with all of this? Because that is something I worry about, is that with it getting worse and then bringing a child into it.
Yeah, that's a massive discussion that will have to be taken up another day. But let me just summarize it like this. There's a war on between light and dark. So there are beings of light who haven't forgotten this here and are aware of what's going on. So a rescue plan is in place. We're on the other side of it. It's almost as if we're in captured territory. It's almost like we're in prison. And the beings who actually love us are trying to break through, and they haven't been able to break through yet. And so great tests are going to come to those of us who are on this side. This is what it says actually in, I think it's the Bhagavad Purana, but maybe a precursor to Bhagavad Purana. Narada Muni says this. He says, he talks about the Kali Yuga. So we're living in the age of darkness. The age of darkness. Kali Yuga means the age of darkness in Hindu philosophy. And it talks about the breakdown, which is a whole nother class. But the scriptures on the website. I'm telling you, the websites, we got resources now, don't we? It talks about the Kali Yuga, and it talks about how fakeness will predominate. That things will be anti-spiritual. That falsehood will take over, etc., etc. And he says, just like Jesus, but those who persevere to the end will be saved. So we have these tools. I would say the main thing I feel like I'm being told to tell you all, get in a favorable place and stay around favorable people. And when you don't have that, take shelter of the scripture, take shelter of lectures or meditations. Feed your mind constantly these things that have the vibrational quality you're seeking when you're alone. And then when you can physically be in that vibrational quality as well. That's what I got. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
No worries. Cool. So can we end the class with 3 ohms? In gratitude. Let's give gratitude for the divine beings, especially Goddess Saraswati, Father Shiva, who have enabled us to come together today. Everyone take a deep breath in. Oh.